I want to welcome you to our evening with David Baldacci. My name is Sherry Ayler, and I currently serve as the president of the Library Foundation here in Manatee County. We are delighted to see all of you here, and I know you're going to have a wonderful and enjoyable evening as you listen to Mr. Baldacci tell his journey of his best-selling novel writing and also his literacy philanthropy. You may not know, the Library Foundation, our mission is to supplement funding to our Manatee County public libraries. The proceeds from this evening will continue our $278,000 two-year financial commitment to a program called I Am a Lifelong Learner. Jody Williams, she is our lifelong learner and literacy coordinator. She came here about 18 months ago. She's a bilingual educator and librarian with over 17 years of experience. Jody partners with other nonprofits building literacy programs throughout Manatee County. Several of those successes include the La Mirada Reading Room and the Anna Gale Community Center Reading Rooms. She is terrific, and we are proud to support her. Last June, the first Dive Into Reading program was held at the Ellenton location of the Anna Maria Oyster Bar. Through efforts of John and Amanda Horn, this new program began. We are working with Manatee County Public Schools and our library. That program had 74 children, and they participated regularly 3 times per week. They were served a hot breakfast and mentored one-on-one with social skills and reading. Each of these children read an average of 25 books per week. Wow. Yes. Results say instead of a summer reading slide, these children gained in their reading skills. Our sincere gratitude to the sponsors of this special event. I encourage each of you to page through your program and note the community organizations and companies and individuals who generously support this evening, the Library Foundation, and our libraries. An event like this takes a lot of time and dedication. There's some folks I would like to recognize. Our event co-chairs, Jamie Carter and Chris Romine. Their committee who worked on details, Susan Wilcox, Doris Pope, Kelly Foster, Tony Comito, Jen Messel, Leah Stewart, Heather Sniffen, and Lisa Moore are handling our book raffle and sales, plus our silent auction. And I thank Sherry Corrier, Deputy County Administrator, Ava Eady, the Interim Director of Neighborhood Services and Library Service Manager, and your staff. And I also must say we can't do it without the volunteers that help us as well. Thank you all. And lastly, look at this lovely venue. Our gratitude to the State College of Florida for hosting us this evening in the Neal Performing Arts Center. It's lovely. And now, please welcome Cassandra Holmes, Executive Director, State College of Florida Foundation.
Welcome to State College of Florida, Manatee, Sarasota, and the beautiful SCF Neal Performing Arts Center. We are hoping that you've noticed a little bit of change with State College of Florida since the last time we partnered with the Manatee County Library Foundation. Our new state-of-the-art, 70,000 square foot, nearly $20 million new library and learning center. Thank you. My name's Cassandra Holmes. I'm the Executive Director of State College of Florida's Foundation. And on behalf of the SCF trustees, our president of our college, Dr. Carol Probsfield, that's out in the audience here, and our SCF Foundation Board of Directors, this beautiful asset, your community college's asset, is available to you simply with a Manatee County or Sarasota County library card. We invite you to use and take your children, take your students that are important in your lives to our new library and learning center. There's nothing like it in the entire state of Florida. Workforce-driven technology is abundant, and that is what you'll see in the libraries of the future, and that gem is right here in Manatee County, and we are very proud of that. Now I get the opportunity to introduce some wonderful legends. And one quick note that I want to say is we so value the partnership with the Manatee Library Foundation. We very much appreciate you choosing this venue. John and Amanda Horn believe that education is important at any age. From creating an award-winning summer reading program called Dive Into Reading for incoming second and third graders to throw a fun annual Horn and Moon Social providing scholarship for adult learners, to schools in our local region, such as State College of Florida, Manatee, Sarasota, USF, Sarasota, Manatee, and Manatee Technical College. The Anna Maria Oyster Bar restaurant and their fantastic staff and employees and their special guests are always ready to step up and help the community and collaborate with everyone to really make it happen, no matter what your level of reading. Welcome, John and Amanda Horn.
Thank you so much. And congratulations to the Manatee County Library Foundation for a wonderful evening. While we're all here to meet an accomplished author and philanthropist, we're also here to support the I Am a Lifelong Learner program at our award-winning Manatee County libraries. We have had the honor of partnering with the library, and specifically with Ava Eddy and Jody Williams for our Dive Into Reading summer reading program last year for incoming second and third graders. Jody advised us on what books to choose to have the highest impact and aided our teacher coordinators to ensure a quality and impactful experience for our kids. Beth Duda from the Patterson Foundation shared this tidbit with us while we were planning our program. From birth to third grade, a child learns to read. From third grade on, We read to learn. What happens when our children do not learn to read? They have difficulty reading to learn after that.
That's why we think it's so important to enable people to help our kiddos in Manatee County learn to read so that they can read to learn. We put guests from our restaurants one-on-one with our kiddos and taught them life lessons on basic table manners while eating breakfast, eye contact while meeting new people, handshake, how important it was to shake hands with people when they met them, as well as reading schools over the month of June last year. And it really was impactful, with our Dive into Reading kids gaining 1.25 months of reading skills instead of losing the normal 2 to 3 months over the summer. We're real proud of our kids. Thank you. We were so successful that we're going to expand this program this year to 5 stores, 5 school programs with the help of the school system. So we're real pleased with that. We only have 3 opportunities, so we've got other restaurateurs and other locations to help. So we're excited about expanding to 5. If you'd like to volunteer, there's always a catch or an ask, isn't there? Keep an eye out because we're going to be looking for mentors, and it's always great to have people come and read to our kids. It's phenomenal. We had the experience where, like, this is a huge problem with grade level reading. And what can one person do? If one person can make an impact on one kid, you've been successful. And so we're trying to provide a place where one person can get with another one person and another one person and make an impact. Our 76 kids read 1,624 books in 1 month. That's pretty impressive. So we're expanding in Manatee County. We're looking to expand in our region next year. We've talked to Todd Baldin from Sarasota. We've talked to the Restaurant and Lodging Association in our area. We're going to expand it to our region. We've also talked to the State Restaurant and Lodging Association. We're hoping to expand it to the state in a few years. And who knows, we may get some national exposure. You just never know. We're all friends here, right? Can you guys keep a secret? I know, what good's a secret if you don't tell anybody, right? Right? That's the way I feel. All right, this is completely off the record, right? The doors are sealed because this is not going to be announced until April, and I'm not supposed to tell anybody, but I'm not real good at that. So promise, this is just between us, kind of like I told them I wouldn't tell, right? So mainly because of our Dive into Reading program this year, the National Restaurant Association, I've always said the NRA, but lately, lately people are like, what? The NRA? The National Restaurant Association. We had the acronym first, by the way. Anyway, the National Restaurant Association's Education Foundation has named the Anna Maria Oyster Bars as the National Good Neighbor Award winner for this year. Don't tell anybody. The official announcement is April the 17th. It's in Washington, D.C. at a great big gala. That'll be attended by, I don't know, 3 or 4 people. So we're really excited about that, but it has not been made public yet, so we're excited about that. So they're going to be in town tomorrow doing some videographies about our program and so forth. So wouldn't it be great if that video went viral and the programs went viral around our country, and we could come up with a program to teach our kids, all of our kids, to read and to love reading. Our secret, right? The other winners are Burger King International, the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, and there is a bakery in California that I couldn't find the name. They wouldn't tell like everybody else, right?
They could keep a secret.
I can't keep a secret.
We have learned so much from these experiences and are proud to support the Library Foundation and its work to develop literacy skills for everyone. But you all came to hear from someone else, beside John and I. I'm pretty sure.
Winston Churchill said that an introduction should be like a woman's skirt. Long enough to cover the subject, short enough to keep your interest. We're fortunate to have with us tonight the man who has introduced us to and given us many new friends to follow. Friends like Will Roby, because you certainly don't want him as an enemy. That's a bad man. Amos Decker, the memory man. I have absolutely nothing in common with that guy. John Puller, Vega Jane, and the lads from the Camel Club. If you can't welcome David Baldacci's characters into your world, you probably can't finish a book past Dr. Seuss. One fish, two fish, blue fish, all you can eat fish. He's written more than 30 books, translated into 45 languages, sold in more than 80 countries, with over 110 million copies in print worldwide. He also writes for numerous magazines, newspapers, and is a contributing editor for Parade magazines. As awesome and phenomenal as that is, probably more important is the work he and his wife, Michelle, have done with their own Wish You Well Foundation, supporting family literacy by fostering and promoting new and existing programs. We're lucky to have him here tonight because his alma mater, the University of Virginia, is the #1 seed in this year's March Madness. They barely beat Clemson in the ACC. I'm telling you, we gave them a run for their money through the first half. I know he'll be glued to the TV watching the basketball tournament over the next 3 weeks, so we're very fortunate. If you'll all please join us with a round of applause and welcome David Baldacci.
It was about as close as when Clemson plays us in football. It's nice to have balance in life, isn't it? Thank you all for coming tonight. It's a beautiful evening outside. I know for people who live here it might seem a little cold. My home is in Virginia. It's a lot colder up there, so I'm lucky I'm wearing a shirt tonight, actually. I've been to a lot of communities across the United States and a lot of countries around the world, and I can sense when a community is special or not. And having spent a few hours here already and met a lot of nice people and seen what you've done in the area, this is a special community. You have a great library system. You have a great local foundation system, and most special of all, you have a lot of great people willing to volunteer and contribute time, energy, and their talents to help people in the community. That's what makes a special community. That makes a place that people want to come and live and raise their family. So I would suggest you give yourselves a round of applause for that. I tour a lot with my books, and I get a lot of questions from people, and probably the question I get more than any other is, what is it like to be a #1 global best-selling novelist? And the way they ask the question, I know they want some sort of, Hollywood glitzy answer, like, I get up at noon every day. I have a special cardigan that I put on. I have a small dog that I carry under my arm, I go down to my study where I have a bevy of people waiting to write down everything I might say. My life is not like that at all. Just ask my wife. I go to a cool event. I come home. I tell her about it. She's like, yeah, it's trash night. Get on it. People have remarked to me that in all of my books, I only write about strong, independent women. I've never written about a damsel in distress in my life for one very simple reason. I've never met one. Can't say the same thing for the men, but that's okay. Anyway, so in answer to that question, what is it like to be a #1 best-selling novelist, I tell them a true story about my kids. My kids are grown now, but when they were little, I took my daughter for the first time to a book event. I was doing a book signing at a store. We walked into the bookstore, and the woman who owned the store came over and greeted us, and she asked my daughter, do you know why all these people are here? And my 5-year-old said, yes, I do know. Why are they here? They're here because they want my dad to sign their book. And why do they want your dad to sign their book? Because my dad has the nicest handwriting. She's 24 now. I think she still believes that, actually, Nice, clear dad. It's just great. Now, the first time I took my son to a bookstore, he was maybe 3. And I was just going to the bookstore like anybody else to buy a book. My son has always been like my little entrepreneur, always looking for the next big deal, right? So we go into the bookstore, and the door opens, and all of a sudden he sees all the people and all the books, and it's like this light bulb goes off in my kid's head, and he starts running across the bookstore, screaming at the top of his lungs, "My daddy will sign any book you've got for $2." Doesn't matter who wrote it, Hemingway, Faulkner, Baldacci, doesn't matter. So that's what it's like to be a best-selling novelist. So, you'll be glad to know that I signed a bunch of books tonight. I waived my $2 signing fee, so you will not have to contribute that. I've published a lot of books over the years, more than 40 now, and I travel a lot. So an interesting phenomenon occurs when those two things sort of conflate. Such that I'm rarely out in public anymore where I don't see somebody reading one of my books. I can't remember the last time I was on a plane and you walk up the aisle to use the restroom, there's somebody with a book, on a train, by the pool, at a hotel, just sitting somewhere. I have one rule about that. If I ever see you reading one of my books in public, I will never come up to you. For a couple of reasons. One, I'm actually a private person and I would never want to invade someone else's privacy in that way. And secondly, and far more importantly, if you're not enjoying the book, I don't want to hear about it. That's what Amazon.com review boards are for. You can go on Amazon.com and anonymously trash any writer you want. For some reason, I don't know why, maybe I was drunk, I went on Amazon and checked out some reviews that people had been writing about one of my books. And I read one, I was fixated on one. It was a woman who had written a review of one of my books, and she'd given me 1 star out of 5, which is the lowest that Amazon allows. And she was lamenting the fact that Amazon did not allow for 0 stars, because that would have been my fate with her. And she said, my biggest problem with this book is that I figured it out in the last 3 pages and therefore found it predictable. The fact that I kept her spellbound for 497 pages, I got no credit whatsoever about that. But it has changed the way, actually, that I've written my books. You may have noticed this, the fact that now my novels no longer contain an ending. There's a 1-800 number on the back of the dust jacket flap. We accept all major credit cards, so I won't be predictable to anyone anymore. So that's my rule. I won't go up to you in public if I see you reading my books. About 6 or 7 years ago, I was on book tour. I was in Los Angeles, flew into LAX very late at night, close to midnight. And I had a busy day the next day. I just wanted to grab my bags. I've been on a long tour, grab my bags, go to the hotel, and go to sleep and get ready for the next day. So I'm heading towards baggage claim, and I'm walking down one of the concourses, and I see a guy who's standing in the middle of one of the aisles. And he has his luggage strewn around him, and he's standing there reading a book. Now, my first reaction was, I felt sorry for him. I'm like, it's midnight, he's in an airport reading a book all by himself. I just felt sorry for him. My second reaction was curiosity. I mean, I'm a writer. I know a lot of people who are writers. So as I walked past him, I sort of looked back over my shoulder to see what he was reading, and he was reading Absolute Power, my very first novel. I remember, vividly sort of vacillating back and forth. Should I? I've got this rule. Shouldn't I? I've got this rule. Finally, I thought, he looked fairly normal. So I walked over to him and I said, wow, it really looks like you're enjoying that book. And he didn't even lower the book. I couldn't see the man's face, but he said, yeah, it's a page turner. I can't put it down. I was thinking, well, obviously. And I said, well, would you like me to sign it for you? So then the book came down a little bit, so I could see his beady little eyes. And he looked me up and down and he said, no. He said, why would I want you to put your name in my book? Are you trying to steal my book? And he was like much bigger than me, too. So I took a step back, thinking to myself, this is why you have the rule, moron. And I said, no, sir, not at all. I saw you reading the book. You said you were enjoying the book. I just thought you'd like it autographed because I wrote it. So the guy looks me up and down again, and he says, no, you didn't. I took another step back. I'm trying to keep this calm, upbeat, light. And I said, well, ironically enough, Absolute Power is my very first novel. I am David Baldacci. So then the guy points a finger at me. I won't tell you which one. It was kind of in the middle of the hand. And he said, look, freak. You're not Baldacci, and get away from me before I call the cops. Now, for all I know, this happens a lot at LAX. LAX is a strange place in the middle of the day, much less at midnight. And for all I know, there's a gentleman walking around in a white suit with white hair going, I'm Mark Twain. I'm dead, but I saw you reading Huckleberry, and, well, I'm a nice guy, and it takes a lot to get me upset, but this man had just pushed my buttons way past maximum. So I said, excuse me. So I reached up, ripped the book out of his hand. I flipped it around where the publisher conveniently places a large picture of me. I held it up to my face and I said, do you see Buckaroo? It's me. So he looks at the picture, he looks at me, he gets sort of a silly grin on his face. He slowly reaches into his pocket where he happens to have a pen. He's looking down at his shoes, he's laughing, and he said, Mr. Baldacci, what an honor. I'm thinking, you know, that ship has sailed, my friend. But he said, would you sign my book for me, sir, please? What could I do? You know, I laughed too. I slapped him on the back, you know, as hard as I could. And I looked at him and I said, no. But I signed it. I signed his books. But if you see me out in public, you got one of my books, don't even try to catch me, you know. I'm actually very fast, so it won't work. About probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, I got, back then you still got fan letters, you know, this is really before email. And I get lots of fan letters and lots of email fan letters. But this was not really a fan letter, it was from a woman who wrote, she's very upset with me. And she said, I can't believe that you took a national scandal and turned it into a tragedy and turned it into a best-selling novel and made money off of it. You're disgusting. And she was talking about Absolute Power. And I was like, oh, well, okay. Obviously, she's very confused. So I wrote her back and I said, well, you're obviously thinking about maybe the Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, but if you, that happened in like 1998, 1999. I wrote Absolute Power when George H.W. Bush was president, you know. And no, it was not based on him. I've met him. He's a very nice guy. And so obviously, if you look at the copyright page on Absolute Power, you'll see the copyright, it was published in 1996, nearly 3 years before anybody had ever heard of Monica Lewinsky. Very pleasant letter. I sent it back to her, and I thought that would be the end of it. So about a week later, I got a very terse reply from her. It was only one sentence, and the sentence read, that proves nothing. So as you can see, the world of alternate facts is not new, folks. It may seem slightly more prominent these days, but it has been around. Now, I grew up as a library rat, and when I walk into a library, I see myself as a kid who fell in love with books of all kinds. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, not that big of a place, never really went anywhere as a kid, but I saw the world through books. And whenever you open a book and start to read, you just dropped yourself into someone else's imagination, into a story that didn't exist before that writer created it, which is kind of cool when you think about it. And being a kid and a reader is really the only reason I'm a writer today, because I wanted to have that same effect over other people. I wanted to create something that would allow people to dive into my imagination, sometimes a good thing, maybe sometimes not. But that's what I wanted to do with my life. Now, the importance of libraries. I can tell you an anecdote that will put any sort of confusion you have about the importance of libraries and a democracy to rest. When a dictator takes over a country, they sort of have a checklist of things that they do. They don't reinvent the wheel. They just do what's been successful with other oppressive regimes in the past. The very first thing they do, no, they don't kill all the lawyers. I was a lawyer, so, you know, we're actually very nice people. They close all the libraries, and they burn all the books. And think about it. It makes perfect sense, because libraries represent a diversity of opinion and thought, different ideas, expressions, freedom of speech, creativity, all the things that an oppressive regime does not want to have in their society. They want people to think alike, talk alike, be alike. So libraries really, for me, are the last bastion of democracies. If the libraries go, the country goes. And that's really all you need to know about the importance of libraries in American society. They really are, and they define us as humanity. They define us as American citizens. We need to keep supporting them, because they should never go away, because then we go away. When people asked about the Wish You Well Foundation, where it's, you know, the genesis of it. When I first started out as a new author, nobody really knew me, and so anybody asked me to go anywhere, I did, you know. I get a little book club, you know, 3 ladies in Nebraska. Would you like to come? Yes, I'll be there. What's for dinner? So I got a really good grounding and a really stark education, because a lot of the events that I went to were sponsored by libraries, library associations, Friends of the Library. And I got a great education in the challenges of literacy and illiteracy and illiteracy in the United States. The last literacy census was taken by the US government was about maybe 8 or 9 years ago. At that point, there were about 200 million adults in the US. Of that 200 million, they graded them on reading levels. And 100 million adults graded the 2 lowest levels of literacy. 50 million couldn't read at all. Another 50 million couldn't even read a short grocery list. So even though we're the richest nation on earth and one of the best educated, there are enormous pockets of illiteracy across this country. It's not a rural problem, it's not an urban problem, it's not a suburban problem, it's an American problem. And it's not just ESL, it reaches across all societal spectrums. And people without that reading skill will never be able to reach the potential. It's the greatest tool anyone can be taught, the ability to read. We live in an information age. We expect people to be participants in democracy. I read a statistic the other day that said a millennial receives more information in a week than their grandparents received in their entire lives. How in the world can you synthesize, process that information without really high reading, cognitive, and comprehension skills? Well, the answer is you can't. And being from Washington, D.C., and having lived and worked there for a long time, I can tell you that if you don't arrive at your own opinions, there are very highly paid people who will be glad to tell you what you should think, you know, and what you should do, and how you should vote, and all the other things like that. So a well-educated, well-read society is certainly what we want. All the founding fathers, for the most part, were incredibly well-read, very well-educated, and believed in books because they knew it was sort of the heart and blood of a free democracy. So the Wish You Well Foundation was born from that. And my wife and I started it about 17 years ago. We have funded programs in virtually all 50 states and counting. And we're a small foundation, almost entirely self-funded. We poured millions of dollars into this because we believe heavily in this is the way to make this country and this society better. And I'm sure all of you probably know a lot of statistics. There are entire states in this country where more than half of the homes have never had a book inside of them, which is, for me, is absolutely astonishing and at the same time not surprising. There is a lack of resources, particularly government resources for literacy, particularly adult literacy and family literacy, but organizations like you have here do a great job, and they make up a lot for that, but they need more resources. The Wish You Well Foundation, you know, we probably get 5,000 grant applications a year, and we go through all of them, and we fund as many of those as we possibly can. About 6 years ago, we partnered with Feeding America, which runs all the nation's food banks. And obviously, there's a nexus between illiteracy and poverty. If you're illiterate, chances are very high that you're not self-sustaining, that you're impoverished. So the food bank has this huge pipeline of distribution, thousands of places across the country. So I called them up and I said, you know what? I can collect a lot of books on my book tours. So if I collect a lot of books, can we use your pipeline to get them out to your patrons? And they said, bring it on, you know. So whenever I go out on book tour, these big white boxes go ahead of me. My fans donate new and gently used books, not just mine, of every sort, every writer, every genre, fiction, nonfiction. And once the box is full, we pay to have it shipped to a local area food bank, so your donations of books stay local. And over the last 7 years, we've donated over 2 million books to the Feeding America. You know, you need food to survive, obviously. No one can survive without food. But food alone will not break you out of that cycle of poverty. And it's a generational thing, too. If you're illiterate, chances are very high your kids will have poor reading skills. They won't be self-sustaining. They won't be able to realize their opportunity and their potentials. And it's a downward spiral. But having books, and I've been in this business a long time, I've never seen a bad result from a book being in a home. I've seen many awful results from no books being in a home. So what we're trying to do with the Feeding America program is trying to get as many books into as many homes as we possibly can. Now, on to some more fun stories. Did you see I stepped off my soapbox? I was on a little soapbox here. I have stepped off the soapbox, and now back to the original program. I wrote a book years ago called The Winner. And in that book, my evil villain, who to this day, it's been 20 years since that book has come out, and people still send me fan mail saying, oh my God, he still scares me. You know, I see Jackson everywhere, and are you gonna bring him back? And I was like, well, he died in the book, but you know, it's fiction, I guess I can, so. Well, anyway, the novel centered on this guy Jackson. He figured out a way to fix the United States National Lottery. He didn't do it with a broad-based conspiracy. He didn't need anybody else's help. He didn't want to rely on people, because why? People are fallible. You know, they make mistakes, particularly when they're under pressure. They make mistakes. He could not allow for mistakes. So he was a scientist, and he approached it from a scientific point of view, such that in science, and particularly if the field of science, it's in the book. I won't tell you what it is, because I would kind of ruin the story for you. But if you do A plus B, you don't get the result of C 80% of the time or 90% of the time. You get that result 100% of the time. It's just the natural law of that particular field of science. So that's how he fixed the lottery. It was a cool book. People loved it. You know, it was a big bestseller. So fast forward 2 years. I get a call from a reporter from La Repubblica, which is the largest daily newspaper in Rome. And the journalist says, Mr. Baldacci, have you heard about the Italian national lottery scandal? And I was like, well, I must have missed that. I said, what's going on? He said, well, someone figured out a way to fix the Italian national lottery, and they used a method very close to what you wrote about in The Winner. How would you like to respond, sir? Well, you know, being a lawyer, my first response was, that's bad. That's very bad. That's a crime. I would never encourage anyone to ever fix a lottery. Don't do it. It's a felony. Second point, that's like the freakingest, coolest thing anybody's ever told me. You know, it worked. But if you read the book, please don't do it. You know, it will end poorly for you. Now, with a name like Baldacci, you probably think I'm Irish. I'm not, Italian-American. And my grandfather was born in a little village in Tuscany in the mountains called Barga. And I never met my grandfather because he actually passed away before I was even born. But I'd heard a lot about him. He came through Ellis Island and headed south, because for a lot of Italians, New York was too cold. And back then, the first major stop in the south on the railroad was Richmond, Virginia. And it's where there's a huge Italian community in Richmond, Virginia because of that very reason. People got off and they're like, it's warm enough here. So they stayed. So my grandfather's name was Amadeo Giovanni Vittorio Baldacci. No one in Richmond could pronounce any of those names. The southern tongue does not wrap itself around vowels that well. So everyone called him Mike. Everybody loved Mike. He was this tall, strapping, sort of Rudolph Valentino-esque kind of guy. And they had 10 kids, one of which was my father. So I always wanted to go to Barga. My dad almost made it. The closest he got to it was Egypt, and then the U.S. Navy told him he could go no farther because they were in the middle of a world war and his services were needed elsewhere. So the year actually my father passed away, I'm going for me, I'm going for my dad, and we're going to go see Barga. So we were going to go with my two kids, they were younger, my wife and some other friends who had some kids the same age. So we planned it all out. We were going to stay in another part of Italy, and then we're going to make our way to Barga and see the town. Before we left for Italy, I got an email from the mayor of Barga who said, I read in a magazine that you're spending your holiday here. It's kind of creepy when you think about it. But I said, well, yes, absolutely. He said, well, I would love for you to come to Barga, and I would love to take you to lunch because I know your grandfather was born here. I was like, oh, my God, yes, absolutely. We were going to come anyway, so great. So the day came for us to go where we were staying to Barga. Now, if you've ever driven in Italy, it's like almost, unless you're in one of like the autostradas, it's almost impossible to get anywhere because I don't think the roads actually connect, you know? It's just the Italians are just lovely that way, you know? They have a good time. They just, you know what, we'll just stop and eat here, you know? We'll break out the wine and we'll go back. And also, you know, they have the system over here at Hertz, you know, called Hertz Never Lost. Same exact system in Italy, slightly different name. Over there they call it Always Lost. So we had the system about 30 minutes outside of Barga. Our Hertz Always Lost, went on holiday, left us, just died completely. So my poor wife is navigating with maps. And I was a trial lawyer, and one thing you learn as a trial lawyer, you're never late. Punctuality is hit into your head because judges do not like you to be late. So we were late already for lunch, and I was getting frustrated. I finally stopped at this crossroads where it seemed like there was something. And I looked at my wife and I said, do you think this is Barga? Do you think we're here? And she looked out the window and said, well, considering that there's a 14-foot tall poster of you on the wall over there, it's a good bet we're in Barga. And then we noted we were in two cars, and we noticed all this traffic, policemen directing people to parking spaces and stuff. And finally, I rolled down the window. I got the attention of one of the officers. He came over, and his broken English and my broken Italian. I said, you know, so what's going on here? He said, oh, it's David Baldacci Day. Park over there. So I rolled the window up, and I looked over at my wife, and she said, David Baldacci Day, are you freaking kidding me? And I said, honey, I had no idea. And she said, liar. That's the other reason I only write about strong, independent women. I sleep with one, okay? We've been married almost 30 years. I'm still as scared of her today as I was on our first day. So we parked and we got out, and it was announced that we were there. And Barga, like if you've been to Italy, Barga, like Lucca, is a walled city. And ancient Barga, old Barga, is within the walls of the city. No cars are allowed in there, just walk. So ancient Barga dates from the 11th century. New Barga, modern Barga, is outside of the gate, and modern Barga dates from the 16th century. They just have a different opinion of what's old over there. So the gates open, and out marches the mayor. And the mayor is draped in the Italian flag and the American flag. And the American flag is flying over Barga for the first time since 1945, when they were liberated by us. Behind the mayor is a marching band. Behind the marching band are videographers and journalists, and behind them are apparently everyone who lives in Barga. So they greeted us, they're hugging and smiling, laughing, and they took us into the walled city, and we did a tour. We went to the Duomo and the Historical Society and the Town Hall, and I did a book signing. And then we went to a lunch. We had a fabulous lunch. It was me, my family, the mayor, our friends, and 1,100 new friends. And we were there for like 5 hours until finally my wife came over and said, you know, we got a long drive back. We're at this villa on the side of a mountain with a one-lane road, no guardrails. If we don't get back by daylight, we're all going to die. So tell the mayor it's been awesome. We're out of here. So I'm a strong, independent guy. So I said, just repeat that again, honey. I want to get exactly what you just said. So she was right. So I went over and I said, you know, this has been a fantastic day, but we have to. And then he interrupted me. He said, now it is time for you to give your grand speech in the center courtyard of the city. And I'm like, this August, I'm in shorts, flip-flops, and a polo shirt. And I was like, okay. So we all march off to the grand courtyard, which is very grand, by the way, very pretty. The marching band, and then when I say a marching band, I mean like a real freaking marching band. I didn't even know they had them over there. So they played one more song and they stopped, and the mayor got up, and they had translators there because I can't speak Italian well enough to do a speech in it, much less a grand speech. The mayor got up and started presenting us with stuff, presents. One was a lifetime supply of olive oil. Yeah. Yeah. It was United Airlines was not nearly as understanding about getting that back on the plane, actually. This looks like more than 4 ounces, okay? This is a problem. We're going to call TSA. You're out of here. They gave me an oil painting painted by a local artist from Barga. They gave us T-shirts and caps and a genealogical chart that they had made of the Baldacci family from the 11th century to my grandfather's generation, in which he had 11 siblings, 8 of whom I had never knew existed because they never immigrated to the US. I mean, that kind of like struck me right in the gut. It's unbelievable. And then they gave me probably the most outstanding gift from the town library archives. They gave me a journal that my ancestor Pietro Baldacci started writing in 1643. And because paper was scarce back then, if you passed away and there was still paper left, it was handed down to the next generation. So the last entry in that journal from another Baldacci is from the 1880s. I've got that in my home library, and it's just an amazing part of my heritage that I never even knew existed. So then the mayor said, okay, the Baldacci Bambinos, come on up, so my kids. So the sea of people parted, and here's my daughter. My daughter was, back then, was maybe 15, teenage girl. So all eyes are upon her. She's walking up, and she's not looking at the mayor. She's not looking at the crowd. She's looking at Dad. And she's giving me the look that any teenage girl would give a father in that situation. And the message was crystal clear. It's etched into my skin, actually, because the stare was so forceful. And it said clearly, "You've ruined my life." Now, to complete the Mars Venus story, my son, who was 12 back then, here's how he comes up. I know, it's amazing, isn't it? Anyway, so I gave my speech. In my speech, which I hadn't prepared, obviously, and I said, well, even though it's August, it's summer, I feel like it's Christmas. Because that pouring of warmth and family and gifts and just this outpouring of love, I'd never expected. I expected to feel many things walking the cobblestone pathways my grandfather had walked as a young man, before he left to immigrate to the United States. But I never expected that component to it. So I did my speech, and it was time for us to go, and as we were walking off the stage, a friend of ours who had traveled there with us said, you have to come over and meet these gentlemen. They've come here to meet you. So he led me over to a bench, and on the bench were 4 very elderly gentlemen. One, I later learned, the youngest was in his early 80s. The oldest was about 102 at the time. And they had felt caps, they all had walking sticks, and they all had a copy of one of my books in Italian. So as I walked up to them, they all stood, and they all took their caps off and sort of gave a little bow of respect to me. And I looked at my friend. I said, well, who are they? And he said, they're all Baldaccis. They all came here, some from other countries, to meet you today. So being Italian, we all started crying. Then I think we had something to eat. But it was just the most memorable moment to me that I'd never expected. But sometimes some of the most special moments are the ones you never can predict are going to happen to you in your life. And that's what makes them sort of special, because they come out of nowhere. And it's a surprise. And sometimes surprises are good. Now, I do a lot of research for my novels. Have you read some of them? Hopefully, I don't Wikipedia stuff. It's just, I don't like authors of Wikipedia. I can sort of tell within 3 or 4 pages that they've actually done any of the things they write about. So years ago, I was thinking about starting this military character, John Puller. And my dad and all my uncles were in various military service branches, and I have a lot of friends who are. In the D.C. area, there's a huge military footprint. Obviously, Pentagon is there and all that. So I wanted to immerse myself as much as I could into the military world before I took this on. I wanted to get it as right as I could. So a friend of mine was a retired lieutenant colonel, Army Ranger, He had trained at Fort Benning. So one day, we jumped on a plane, we flew down to Fort Benning, and I spent 3 days at Fort Benning getting my butt kicked from one end of the base to the other, training with the Rangers. The first thing when I got there immediately took me right to the parachute jumping grounds. Now, there are 2 towers at Benning. One is 212 feet high, and you jump off with a real parachute, and hopefully you land safely. For liability reasons, they refused to let me jump off of that tower. Thank you, God. And there's another shorter tower that has a little shack on top that you jump off and you're attached to a zip line, a little cable. So they would let me jump off of that. Okay, great. So there were like 50 paratroopers at the training grounds. They knew I was coming. They were all there to, to greet me, say hello, and to give me instructions. So they put my metal hat on. They were putting all the harnesses on me. I'm having to sign all these waivers. If you die, it's not our fault, And you have to sign all that or they won't let you jump. And so here I am, and one of them told me, I said, look, the harness on your chest where the zip line cable is going to go, don't worry about it. Not a problem. You don't have to even think about it. The problem are the harnesses around your thighs. When you jump off that tower, you're going to drop really fast. And if these harnesses are not tightly cranked around your legs, they're going to move. And they're going to hit a part of your anatomy you will never forget. So I am walking up the tower, and I am cranking these straps back so tightly I had no blood flow in my lower extremities. So I got up to the top of the tower, and it's a little shack, but it has a cutout door like a plain fuselage door. And it's just me and the jump master, just the 2 of us up there. So I get up there, and he introduces himself, and he says, okay. He takes a little cable, it's a little hole in the wall, a little cable, and clicks it on here. And that's my security blanket. That's the cable that's going to keep me from dying. He said, first thing, are you afraid of heights? So I went over to the edge, and I looked down, and I was like, not until I got up here. He said, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to back up to the far wall. You're going to get a running start. You're going to run right towards the open air. And keep in mind, through the doorway, all you see is the open air. You don't see any apparatus that's actually hooked to this thing that's hooked to me. He said, you're going to hit the doorway. You're going to push off the doorway. And you're going to jump as far away from the building as you can, because the farther away you jump, you won't drop as fast. Now, you're going to get, because they're trying to simulate you jumping out of a plane, you're going to get jerked violently to the right. And if you don't remember anything I tell you, remember this. Throughout this process, when you get jerked violently to the right, keep your chin tightly tucked to your chest. And, I'm a curious guy. So I said, why is that so critical? He said, otherwise the cable will come around and it'll take your ear right off. Now, I thought he was just messing with me, which, I get that. Except about 6 months later, when I was doing a book signing, I'm there signing, guy comes up, young, fit guy, close cropped hair, he had a ball cap on. He put his book down, he said, hey, Mr. Baldacci, I heard you jumped at Benning. And I said, yeah, I did. He said, yeah, me too. I forgot to tuck. So he takes his cap off, turns, half of his ear gone. So I excused myself from the signing, I went to the restroom, I threw up. But because I'm a very tough guy, I came back and finished that signing. So I told the jump master, don't worry, cemented to my chest. Don't worry about that. He said, okay, now you're going to be heading down to the ground at quite a velocity, and then there'll be soldiers on the ground waiting to give you further instructions. So I stared at him for a second. I said, do you mean while I'm still up in the air? And he said, yes, sir. I said, okay. Now, I have to admit, it took me a little bit of time to work up the courage to do all this stuff, right? And I found out later that down below, they had formed a betting pool, the paratroopers and my friend. So it was 50-1 that I was not going to jump. I was going to chicken out. The only guy who bet for me was my buddy, who flew down there with me, and he told me later that night over a couple of beers that, yeah, I bet a lot more money against you, though. Thank you. And he also, my friend, I don't know why, decided he was going to videotape the whole thing, right? So he's got the camera, he's holding it, I'm still not there, and finally you hear on the video, one of the paratroopers, this guy jumps out of planes, no problem. One of the guys says, what the hell is he doing up there? Writing a damn book? Why, yes, that's the whole point of why I'm here. So finally I said, I am not walking down, I'm jumping. So I backed up to the far wall, I got a running start, jumped right out, pushed off as far away from the building as I could. I kept this like here. I still felt that stupid cable come around and clip the back of my ear. And I'm heading down to the ground at like a 45-degree angle, really, really fast. And I look and see I'm heading right towards a 5-foot-tall dirt berm wall. I'm going to crash into the wall. I'm going to die. I'm like, what sick joke was this? And then I hear people screaming at me from the ground. Lift your feet, sir. Lift your feet immediately. Those were the further instructions. So I lifted my feet past my head because in addition to being tough, I'm incredibly flexible. I cleared the dirt berm wall by a couple of inches and they stopped me, grabbed my harness, stopped me before I really hurt myself. And for all of that, the Army gave me a piece of paper and it said, congratulations, you jumped. I did the sniper range where you have 2 sniper rifles you can fire. One is a manual and one is an auto load. And you're firing at distances on the range where you can't see the target with the naked eye. It's all done through scope. And they make the targets metal for a special reason. So, they sort of showed me how to do it. You have to lay on the ground. You have to have some support. These weapons are pretty heavy. You can't stand and fire a sniper rifle. And the scope is really tricky. You make one false movement and your scope goes entirely black, which is very frustrating for somebody like me who I'd never done it before. But I fired some rounds and I eventually did hit the target. But when you fire a sniper rifle, it's like you pull the trigger and you go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, ping! They make the bullets out of metal so you can hear it hit the target because you can't see it hit the target. It's like 1,500 meters away. So I hit it a couple of times, which was, gratifying. These guys hit it a lot more than that. I did the Humvee rollover test. They put you in an upside-down Humvee, and they spin it around like a top, and then you're hanging upside down, trying not to throw up, and they give you an order to egress immediately before you drown or something. So they time you, and I got out of that Humvee, and the guy who administered the test said, that's the fastest anyone's ever gotten out of that Humvee. And I said, yes, it is. I'm sure no one who's done it before has ever been as scared as I was. I did the Army functional fitness training where you have a master sergeant in front of you, one behind you. These guys are built like brick walls, and you constantly move. The Army's figured out these exercises soldiers do in the field. So in the circuit, weight training circuit, all you're doing is squatting, thrusting, pulling, jumping, pushing for nonstop for an hour. And you can't stop because the guy behind you will just run right over top of you. So I survived that barely. So all that stuff allowed me to write a better book. But here's the best thing I ever did. And it's one thing that writers need to be. I'm a really good listener. So I just sat down and I talked to soldiers from privates all the way up to the 2-star who was the commander at Fort Benning. And back then, Iraq and Afghanistan were going really heavy, hot and heavy. So Benning is all infantry. And back then, it was all men. That has changed, which is a great thing. But these kids, the average age was 18 and a half. And the way it worked at Benning was that you had 12 weeks of basic training. And then if you qualified for it or wanted additional training, you got 4 more weeks of specialized training. And the very next day, you're on a plane to either Iraq or Afghanistan, without exception. So these are young men, 18 and a half. And so I would sit down and I would ask them, why'd you make this choice? There are other things you could have done with your life. You know you're going to stay stateside. You're going to be in combat, in the field of fire. You could die. And the answers were as varied as the people I talked to. Some said, look, we were attacked on 9/11. I want to defend my country. Others were like, I want to take, the fight to them on their property because they took the fight to us in our country. Others were like, this is the only shot I have at a good life. I come from nothing. I come from a place that has no opportunity. I will learn a skill in the Army. If I survive the war, I'm going to get some money for college. And this is my shot at a better life, and I'm taking it. So all of those things, just listening, which is the most important thing I did down there, allowed me to write a much better book, none of that of which I could have gotten on Wikipedia, clearly. Now, research is really important, but research sometimes can get you into enormous trouble, and that happened to me, unfortunately, one time. I was sitting on an Amtrak Acela train, which is America's version of a bullet train. It goes from, although I tell you, I've been on commuter trains in Italy that go like 90 miles faster than our bullet train. This is like a commuter train. Let's jump on the commuter train. Okay, we're going, phew. You go to the Acela, and it's like, here we go. Okay. But I'm sitting in one of the train cars, and I'm sitting at a table that I'm sharing with two guys I don't know. It's kind of first come, serve. I'm on this side, two guys over there. I assume they were businessmen. They had suits on, they had laptops, Blackberries, cell phones, miniature satellite towers. These guys were like doing deals and business. It was awesome. And I was on my phone. I was calling a friend of mine who's a medical examiner in the Bronx Medical Examiner's Office in New York, who was a recognized authority on a field of forensic science that I needed to know more about for a novel I was writing called Split Second. It was the first novel in the King and Maxwell series. And the only reason I was calling her is because I wanted to set up an appointment to meet with her face-to-face. I love to do all my interviews face-to-face. Sometimes how people say something is just as important as what they say, physical tics and all that. I like to, even as a lawyer, I always wanted to see my witnesses. Set up an appointment. Unfortunately, she told me she was leaving to go overseas on special assignment that day. She was leaving for the airport, JFK, before I even got to New York. She was insisting in a criminal case overseas that required her forensic skill set. And it was a clandestine investigation because it was being conducted with an ally of the US. And she had no communication back stateside. She'd be gone for about 3 weeks. So I could either ask her my questions now or wait until she got back. I didn't want to wait nearly a month, to talk to her. I said, look, this is not the way I usually like to do it, but if it's the only slot of time you have, let's just go it. So I had my questions, and I said, okay, look, Doc, this is basically how I want to murder the guy. Yeah. They say hindsight is 20/20. So I went through my very elaborate poisoning technique that I'd given a lot of thought to. I said, look, Doc, you have to understand that I want to make sure when the police are called to investigate this homicide, they won't even know this person's been murdered. And she said, David, the way you described it, it really is a perfect crime. No police officer during an investigation in the field would be able to determine the person was murdered based on what you told me. I said, great, but there's going to be a post-mortem done on the body. I need to be able to fool a medical examiner. They won't know the person's been murdered. She said, David, trust me. I've often thought about murdering people. Good public servant that she is. If you do it just the way you described it to me, there's no forensic test that I know regularly conducted during a post-mortem that would be able to ascertain this person had been murdered by any type of foul process. I said, I said, that's great. So I asked her a few more questions, and I ended by saying, I got to tell you, Doc, if I ever need to kill anybody else, I'm going to give you a call. So I clicked off, and I'm sitting and writing my notes, and I finish, and I look up. So the guy over here had spilled his coffee from his neck to his crotch. He was like one big brown stain, incredibly ticked off at me. I will never forget the gentleman sitting right across from me. He wasn't saying anything. This is exactly what he was doing. And over his shoulder, here come the Amtrak police. Amtrak has its own police force. And I did not make it to New York that day. I was detained as a person of interest by the Amtrak police, who apparently don't read a lot. So if you ever read Split Second, there's the acknowledgement section, which is in the back of the book. It's where writers thank people who helped them with the book and all that. So the very last acknowledgement in Split Second reads something like this. To any and all passengers on the Amtrak Acela train who might have overheard me discussing poisoning techniques with an expert and were probably scared out of their wits at my seemingly diabolical intent, I apologize. I thought it was really fair of the judge to let me do it that way. I'll tell one more story, and then I think we have time for a few questions. The other question I get from fans, you're a famous writer, so you must get recognized a lot in public. No, almost never. Being a writer in this country is sort of like this anonymous celebrity, you know. Obviously, people in LAX never look at the dust jacket photo. But it's nice. I mean, I wouldn't want to go out and be mobbed. We're not musicians or athletes. We don't have that level of fame. It just doesn't happen. However, when it does happen, when you are recognized in public, it's not always the ego stroke that you think it might otherwise be. I was at a restaurant. I don't even remember what town we were in. I was having lunch with my wife. We were in a booth. And, you know, you're eating, and I looked up. I looked across the way, and I saw a man and a woman all the way across the restaurant having lunch together. And the woman was laser locked on me, like laser locked. She was like, I was like, oh, my God. And it startled me. So I looked away. And I thought, you fool, she's probably looking at something else. You just overreacted. So I waited a minute, looked over, laser lock. You know, it's like I had a red sniper dot on my forehead. Totally freaked me out. So I just stopped looking. I'm just eating my lunch. And a couple of minutes went by, and then I sensed a presence next to us, and I thought it was the waitress. I looked up. It's the woman. So she pushes me over in the booth and sits down next to me. And she looks at me with a sort of this, you know, wry grin, and she says, "You are who I think you are, aren't you?" Any English teachers want to diagram that sentence? It's got a lot going on, let me tell you. So I had no idea if the woman was a psychopath. I didn't know if she had a gun. I didn't know what was going on. So I said, you know, I'm trying to keep it calm. And I said, well, do you read a lot of fiction? And she smiled again and said, oh, yes, I do. I said, well, I guess I am who you think I am. And then she just lost it. She said, oh, my God, I never thought I have this opportunity in my whole life to meet you. This is like the most magical moment of my entire life. I can't even process what's happening to me right now. And then she turns and she screams across the restaurant to her husband. She said, I was right, Joe. It is John Grisham. I've known John about 20 years. I know he came down and did this event, I think, a couple of years ago. I did an event with John in November, and I waited for years until we were at a very public event at Yale on stage. And I told the moderator, she said, any questions you want to ask? Jody Picoult was there, I was there, and John was there, and I was the last one. And I said, you have to ask us about the strangest thing that's ever happened to us in public. So Jody told her story. John told his story, and it got to me, and I told that story, right? And I thought I'd have to perform CPR on Grisham. I really did, because he was like on the floor, barely breathing. So, you know, I love John. He's a great guy. Anytime I've ever asked him to step up and do something charitable, he's done it. Wonderful man. If you ever meet him, you'd love him. Great guy. That moment of my life, I wasn't really feeling the love for John. And my poor wife, to put it delicately, she blew iced tea out of her nose. You know, it's like, and you know, after she stopped laughing, she said very politely to the woman, she said, you know, that's the right genre, but you got the wrong author. And the woman looked at me and she was mortified. And she said, oh my God. She goes, are you Baldacci? And I said, yeah, I am. So obviously terribly chagrined that I was not Monsieur Grisham, she turns and screams across the restaurant again to her husband, you were right, Joe. It is the Italian. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am, right there. Speak up so everybody can hear. Okay. Answer the first question, who's my favorite character of all the characters I've created? You know, it's almost like saying, you know, which is your favorite kid? For me, it all depended on the day for the kids. You're my favorite? No, you're my favorite. You're not my favorite. You're definitely not my favorite. Maybe because he's the newest character, Amos Decker really appeals to me. He's my memory man guy. He's so different. You know, when you think about it, okay, I'm going to create a series of a lot of books. I hope people enjoy it. So I'm going to get this really huge, obese guy who has this esoteric skill and can't get along with anyone. Yeah, that'll be great. That'll be very popular, I'm sure. People love that. And they actually do love him. But I think it's just because he's so different from any character I've created. Other favorite characters, probably the Camel Club, and also, you know, the people in Wish You Well, the novel Wish You Well. So the second question. I'm a Washington, D.C. sports fan, okay? So I never look ahead. Our hearts get broken time and time and time again. The Redskins, I was there. I watched the Redskins when it was Joe Gibbs. It was like we were a Super Bowl every other year, right? And then Dan Snyder bought the team, and well, that's all I'm going to say about that. And then we have the Nationals, who tear it up during the regular season and can't get past the first postseason. And then we have the Capitals, who like destroy everybody, and then the Pittsburgh Penguins come in and they break our hearts, right? Great team as well. So, you know, UVA. I also went to VCU, which is in Richmond. We made the Final Four like 6 years ago, out of nowhere. We were like that Cinderella team nobody ever heard of. And it was a great run. UVA has a great team. I know they're a #1 ranked seed right now, but I think if I try to predict that they're gonna face and who's gonna be the toughest, they're gonna lose. You know, so I just can't do that to myself. You know, I'd have to check myself in somewhere. Anyway, yes, sir. What's my typical writing day like, and do I write longhand or on the computer? My typical day is typical for being atypical. Every day is different for me. Long ago, my wife kicked me out of the house because she didn't want people coming like to interview me and journalists and photographers. So I've had an office outside the house for probably 15 years. So if I'm in town, I go there every day and I work there. But I write on planes, I write on trains, I write in cars. For me, the perfect place to write does not involve a physical or geographic space. The perfect place to write is here. If I'm in the zone, one of my favorite places to write, I'm in a little town in Northern Virginia, and there's this Greek place that I love. I love this Greek place. And it's not that close to my office, but I love this food. So I go there, and I sit in the back with my computer, and there's like 300 people in there eating. I mean, it's cramped like crazy. The food is so good. And I'm back there, and I don't hear any of it, and I get some of my best writing done in the middle of chaos, because I just am able to wall it off. In fact, I was in there one time, and you go up and you order, and my table, somebody was at my table in the back. I was like, you know, maybe I'll just have to take it back to the office. And I thought, well, by the time I order and get my food, maybe it'll be open. So I was getting my food, looked over, and another guy was over there at the table. He had taken the table. I was like, crap, you know. So I paid, I was getting ready to leave, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around, and it was the guy who was at the table. He had bussed the table. He worked there, and he said, "Your desk is ready, Mr. Baldacci." They're going to be in the next book, actually, you know, because that's like service with a smile. And so for me, no day is typical. Some days I write all day. Some days I research. Some days I just think about what I want to write about. One day I'll work on an adult fantasy that I'm writing for Scholastic. Next day I'm working on the next thriller. I worked on a television film project one day. Another day I just was researching, interviewing people, or I was out and people were, you know, doing publicity with me. So every day is different, which I like that. But I find that I can write, if I'm in the zone here, I can write anywhere. And that's just what writers are. I'll be at parties. I was at a party for Christmas last year, and I'm sitting in the corner, blank face. I'm just like this. And somebody saw me and went over to my wife, Michelle, and they said, "Oh my God, has David had a stroke?" So my wife, who knows me better than anyone, looks over and says, "No, he's just finishing a chapter. Give him 5 minutes, I'll be right back." Writing is not a hobby or a job for me. It is a lifestyle. I can't separate that from me. And without that, I don't think there would be a me there. So it inhabits all parts of my being. People ask, where do you get your ideas? I say, I wake up every morning and walk out the door. And I just see stuff. and I think about how I can make it into something that other people might find interesting. I love going to places like this because I meet people, and I see venues, and I see interesting things. You know, walking out from a dark space behind the curtain just sort of gave me lots of little things I can think about as well. And you never know where you're going to meet somebody who might end up a book, a character. I've met lots of characters here tonight. I really have. And they've been wonderful and really nice. All right, we'll take one more question right here. That's a good question. Do I think of technologies like virtual reality being a threat, a competitor to reading, or being sort of a basis for how kids enjoy, reading, will enjoy to read and being creative? For me, it doesn't matter to me how people read. They can read these days on an ebook. They can listen to it on a downloadable or audible. They can read it as a real book, but they're still reading. Our whole humanity is based on stories, if you think about it. That's how history is handed down from one society to another, one generation to another through stories. And so we instinctively crave storytelling. So people have been, moaning about the death of the book and the death of the story for years, but it's never been stronger in many ways. Movie audiences are record highs. The music industry is thriving. Stage plays are doing really great. And novels and books are doing the same. And people crave that. So for virtual reality, go for it. Enjoy it. And maybe you'll see a virtual reality you think might make a really great story, and you're a young kid and you grow up to write a really great story about virtual reality, and all of us are the better for it because stories really rule in my world. Thank you very much.
What an impressive storyteller and writer, one of my favorite writers. I was so thrilled when I found he could join us for the evening, and a philanthropist and a library advocate. So I am ever so grateful to have had David Baldacci, and I'm very grateful for all of you for joining us for it. Thank you. I am very, very pleased. Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. My name is Ava Eady, and yes, I do have a cold. I'm not normally this sexy. I'm the library manager for Manatee County, and I have a pretty amazing team that works with me to be a very successful library system. And we also have a very impressive library foundation that helps bring events like this together, that continues to be an amazing advocate as well as fundraiser. And we have great friends groups and volunteers, such as the Horns, that work with us out there in the community, and so many of you for being sponsors for events like this. So thank you very much. We really see our libraries as the people's university. I think the public library has a very old, sometimes out-of-date notion for a lot of people, but we serve the community at every age, at every income, from birth to death, and that's a pretty amazing place to be. I feel we get to know the community. We're a trusted place, and we're a place where people come together and meet other people. We community build. We support children with early literacy efforts to help prepare them for school. And we work with newborns and their mamas, and we help them with interactivities. The teens and the tweens come in, and we inspire them with creative, hands-on opportunities that we hope inspire them to work collaboratively and to do teamwork and to get some social skills other than these. We're pleased for our millennials, who themselves are now young parents coming back to the library sometimes for the first time in many years. And they come in and they have such great civic-minded interests that they want to keep working for the community. And so they're really working with their children as well for the first time. Our boomers, they come in and they have hobbies and personal interests, and they're looking forward to retirement. They want to get some planning in there. Sometimes they're doing some job training because they want to switch jobs. And our retirees, they come in for entertainment, and they're looking for inspiration or new languages so they can travel. And we help them with some of our creative aging series to build new community, because as we all know, we keep losing people every day. And some of our favorite people are the first to go. And it kind of breaks your heart. And so you want to see how you can find those like-minded interests and bring people back together and help keep being some of the fabric of community. So whatever age group it is, we're thrilled to be a part of this community. We love our manatee community. We're very, very, very happy in our work. We're never going to get rich or famous as librarians, but we sure do love what we do, and you all make that a better and more special place for us to do it. So thank you for all your efforts. I don't have much more to add other than if you have bought a raffle ticket, the raffles are out in the lobby. And if you have bid on a silent auction, I believe there's another 15 to 30 minutes that they're going to give people a chance as you leave to add your name to one of those. And I wish you all luck, and I thank you once more. Good night.